my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. If you're new to The Birth Hour, you may not know that we have an online childbirth course that is evidence-based. It includes 12 modules that take you from your final weeks of pregnancy through obviously preparing for birth and then postpartum and feeding your baby as well. And with enrollment in that course, which is called Know Your Options, you'll get free access to our other course called Beyond the First Latch, where we talk all about pumping, feeding baby, storing milk, going back to paid work if that's part of your plan, all of those things as well. Okay, so if you go to thebirthhour.com/course, you can see everything laid out in the course, module by module, as well as an FAQ section, which will hopefully answer some of your questions if you have any, things like how to get it covered by an FSA account and things like that. It also talks about the bonuses that come with the course, including bi-monthly Zoom calls and access to our private Facebook group. So again, that's thebirthhour.com/course. And you can use the coupon code 100OFF for $100 off enrollment as a podcast listener. We would also love to welcome you into our listener supporter group via Patreon. That's at patreon.com/birthhour. And by becoming a Patreon supporter, you get access to all of our archived episodes. This podcast launched in 2015, so we have over 800 episodes in the archives that are not in the main podcast feed. So you can get your fill of birth stories. And you'll also get access to our private Facebook group for Patreon members, which is a great place to honestly just to search the past posts to get answers to questions, but then of course to ask new questions, find community. It's a really, really great supportive group of people. So I highly recommend joining that. We would love to have you there. We also do monthly Zoom calls with our Patreon supporters, and you get an opportunity to enter your birth story via a different submission form than everyone else uses, and we choose 2 Patreon members each month to share their birth stories. So that is again at patreon.com/birthhour. There's also the opportunity to give Patreon membership as a gift, and that's just patreon.com/birthhour/gift. And it's pretty cool. You can click on which level you want to join, and then you can click on how many months. So somebody can gift you a year, which gets you a pretty good discount, but also they could do 9 months as, for your whole pregnancy or something like that. So that's a fun option. And again, that's at patreon.com/birthhour/gift. Today's birth story guest is Bethany, and she's going to share about her experience with 2 years of infertility and eventually seeking an IVF cycle, but getting pregnant before doing the actual cycle. So that's an interesting story. She also does share briefly about an early pregnancy loss, so just be aware of that going into this episode. And then she goes on to talk about her 2 home births, which were very unique. The first was in a red tent, which we had a red tent birth story at the very beginning of the birth hour. I think it was like episode number 3 or something like that. So it's been a while, and I was happy to hear another one. And then her second home birth, she went into labor during a hurricane in Florida and had to evacuate to a hotel, but then there was a surprise at the end. So it's a really fun story, and I'm excited for you guys to hear it. Today's episode is in partnership with Anido. Anido is the only at-home fertility monitor that tracks 4 key hormones, estrogen, LH, PDG, and FSH, on a single test strip and provides lab-grade insights in just 10 minutes. Unlike other ovulation kits that only give you 1 to 2 fertile days, Anido tracks your full 6-day fertile window and doesn't just predict ovulation, it confirms it, which is essential information when trying to conceive or understand your hormone health. Instead of piecing together fragments of information, it offers a full, clear picture of hormone health. With 97% accuracy, Anido offers the reliability of a blood test minus the inconvenience and the expense. I've had the chance to personally use Anido, and I was amazed at the user experience of their app. You enter your last period date, and from there, the app guides you through exactly what to do and even sends you a notification when it's time to test. The kit comes with everything you need to collect a urine sample, and the Aneto connects to your phone's camera to read the test. There's no squinting and guesswork. We've all been there. It's just easy to read results and clear directions when you're in that fertile window and when you ovulate. The Aneto Starter Pack is available for just $89 with the code THEBIRTHHOUR at Aneto.com. That's INITO.com using code THEBIRTHHOUR. Y'all know I only recommend products that I really believe in, and I truly wish I had had this product when I was trying to conceive our third baby, and I know it's going to be a game changer for so many of you. So again, I hope you check it out at Aneto.com, coupon code THEBIRTHHOUR. Hi, Bethany. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hi, Bryn. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, we have a lot to get to today, but before we do that, can you tell listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Sure. My name is Bethany. I now live in Florida with my husband and 2 kids. My daughter, Kilmer Dove, just turned 2, and my son, Pesci Pearl, is 6 months old. In the past year, we've had a ton of transitions, which has included moving from New York City to the Treasure Coast of Florida. And I also closed my business, which was an online fitness company. So now I'm primarily focusing on raising kids and sharing my motherhood journey with my online following.
All right. So I know you have a journey to becoming pregnant that you want to share. So let's just start wherever you're comfortable.
Okay. So my husband and I started trying to conceive in the fall of 2020. We always knew that we wanted kids. We've known each other for a long time, and that was a really big piece of our story. And we were also certain that we were going to get pregnant as soon as we started trying. And looking back now, I realize how naive that is. But, truly, we tried the first month and I went to take a pregnancy test, and instead I started my period, and I just felt like I was slapped in the face, even though it was the first month, right? I was very, very confused as to what was going on. And so we continued to try. And by 6 months, I was really, really distraught. And at 6 months of trying to get pregnant, I also turned 35. And anyone who is 35 and trying to conceive will know that when you are Googling, that sounds really scary. Society makes you feel very, very old when you are 35 and trying to get pregnant.
Yeah.
Which is a whole other podcast, right?
Right. We've at least progressed to advanced maternal age instead of geriatric,
exactly.
But still not great.
So I'm, having this birthday and I'm just like, what is going on? So it was time that we decided to start getting some blood work and figuring out what was going on. We found a local midwife, and all of the labs that we did came back not only okay, but they came back great. My AMH was great. My husband's sperm was great. Everything was looking really good. And in so many ways that was encouraging, right? Because there wasn't this big thing wrong, but in a lot of other ways, it felt really frustrating because I just didn't feel like I had a way to take control of the situation, and everything felt very unknown. So it was around this time that we decided to put our names on a wait list at Columbia Fertility in New York City. We had a friend who had a really good experience there. It was a 4-month wait to get in with the doctor that we wanted, which that also felt frustrating. But finally, once we were in the clinic and ready to go, we were at about a year of trying to conceive. So the plan was to start with doing an IUI, which is an intrauterine insemination, I believe, or is what that acronym stands for. And this is basically where they are tracking ovulation. For anyone who doesn't know, they're tracking ovulation. They're taking a fresh sperm sample, and then they are injecting it directly into the uterus to help increase the chance of pregnancy. I will say that when we went to the fertility clinic, I was pretty against having to go this route because, again, I thought I was going to get pregnant so quickly. But it did actually feel kind of relieving to have someone else doing the tracking of the cycle and, not peeing on a stick every single day for ovulation and doing all of the legwork myself. There was something about going there that really did offer a lot of relief. And we got pregnant on our second IUI cycle. And when we took the test, it was actually Christmas Eve. And I was so overjoyed. I was so relieved. I was just like, I remember thinking, all of that was a fluke, right? Like having to be in medical care, having to deal with trying to get pregnant. Like I felt almost like that wasn't me and it wasn't a part of me. And just like, I never want to deal with it again. We told all of our family that we were pregnant on Christmas Day. It was like snowing when we did the pregnancy test. It was just like, it was so magical. It was straight out of a movie. But then we went back for the ultrasound and the doctor didn't see a yolk sac. And that was when he told us that he didn't think that it was going to be a viable pregnancy. And this was, I was only 7 weeks. And when I tell this story, I try not to caveat it with the fact that it was an early loss because loss is so hard. I just think it depends on, wherever you are. Like I was so heartbroken. It just felt like we had been trying and climbing this mountain to get there. And we finally got it. And then it was just taken away. And it was a really, really bleak time for me. And I have to say, like, of everything that I've experienced in my life, like this was one of the hardest moments of my life was this time trying to conceive. So for anyone who is out there and going through it, like I feel so deeply for you because it really is tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so hard. And I feel like the timing of like the cycle, right? So it's like every month you're going through the same emotions over and over again.
Yes. And there's just no break.
Yeah. Yeah.
And weirdly, that was actually something that our miscarriage kind of gave me was a little bit of a break. I really wanted to pass it on my own. It was considered a missed miscarriage. I didn't start bleeding. So I wanted to pass it on my own. I waited another 5 weeks until I was 12 weeks. And then I just couldn't wait any longer. My body started to feel like a coffin almost. I just felt like I was in this limbo. I couldn't move forward. I couldn't be stuck in the past. It felt like other people wanted me to move on and I couldn't. And so we ended up opting for a DNC. And I think that was like a tough decision to make, how I wanted to pass the baby. But I really do think that at the end of the day, the DNC was a good option for us. And we were able to have the tissue tested and everything in the tissue was fine. And that was that.
Gave you some answers and some closure.
Yes, exactly. So now at this point, we decided that we wanted to move forward with IVF. And I was so from the get-go, like completely against IVF. I have no issue with it now, but it was more like for me, I'm the type of person, I don't really like to take medicine. As you all will find out, I had 2 home births. I'm a little more natural mindset. And just the idea of having to do injections completely freaked me out. I have a needle phobia. I really didn't want to do IVF. And then it was like, okay, I think that this is what we needed to do. And IVF really does offer a lot of comfort in many ways. You can test the embryos, you can avoid risk of miscarriage. Like there's some, definitive things that we can do to not be in the position that we were in before or to help our chances. So we started the process of IVF, but a few days before my egg retrieval, we had some concerning blood work come back. I'm not going to go into this whole story because it is honestly wild and it'll take a long time to tell it, but it was very weird. And my doctor was like, what is going on? And he was like, we need to put a pause in creating embryos until we have all of this sorted. So he told us that we were going to freeze our eggs and then we were going to have to wait another 2 months before we could make embryos. And at this point, I was just like beside myself. I just feel, when you're in this process of working at fertility clinics, everything takes a long time and it takes longer than you think it's going to. And so we had this 2-month break where we just had to wait. And we got pregnant in the 2-month break of waiting. So we still ended up making our embryos. We have 4 embryos on ice, but we ended up getting pregnant on our own, completely out of the blue.
Crazy.
I know.
So crazy.
And so every time I tell this story, there's always somebody that's like, oh yeah, you finally relaxed, so now you got pregnant, or like you stopped trying, so now you got pregnant. And I just want to say that is not the case at all. I did not relax. I did not stop trying.
Yeah, it's not a helpful comment really either.
Not at all. Like I was still very stressed. My husband was working 2 hours away. So I was driving every other day just to like go have sex and, like doing all these things. But we got pregnant because that was our time to get pregnant is, the only way that I can think of it.
Yeah.
And getting pregnant again, this time felt totally different. It didn't have the Christmas Eve, snowy, like, oh my God, feeling. It actually felt kind of scary. Like I felt scary to tell people. I felt so terrified to be excited about the pregnancy. And I remember talking to my therapist about this, and she was like, listen, if you miscarry this baby, if you have another miscarriage, it's going to suck whether you are excited about it or not. And that really stuck with me because it was just so honest, like it's okay to be excited and that doesn't necessarily affect how you're going to feel later. So the thing that I held on to with this pregnancy is that my due date ended up being March 9th, 3/9, which just so happens to be me and my husband's wedding anniversary. And we got married on 3/9 because 39 is our lucky number.
Oh, love it.
So I was like, okay, she is just trying to, she's giving me some sign that like, this is the one and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So I stayed with my fertility clinic for as long as they would allow me to, because as most people know, like it's really hard to get early scans if you're just in regular care. But at the fertility clinic, like you can go talk to those people every day. So I was getting scans weekly. I know that some people kind of look down on having a lot of scans, especially if you are from more of a natural mindset in giving birth, but they eased so much anxiety for me that I very quickly realized that it was better for me to have the scan and feel at peace than to not have the scan and just like be dealing with a ton of anxiety. So that was how we got pregnant.
Okay, that was quite the journey and so many cool little signs there at the end. So let's go ahead and hear how pregnancy went.
So my husband and I, we always knew that we wanted a home birth. Like many people, we watched The Business of Being Born and we started interviewing midwives. And we also wanted to interview an OB. I think a really tricky thing about where we were and where we went, right, was being in a fertility clinic, being like heavily monitored. And then the idea of switching to midwifery care, which is like a whole different type of monitoring, right? It's more like, how are you feeling? How are your emotions? And not necessarily like getting ultrasounds and like running tests all the time. So that felt like a pretty big jump.
Yeah.
But when I had a conversation with an OB, I didn't really like the way that it felt because right away we were talking about my age. I was now 36 and we were only on a Zoom, but she wanted me to start taking baby aspirin. And it was just like really negative. And for this particular OB, it felt very fear-based. And that was enough. And there are certainly OBs who are not this way, but that was how this call was. And that was enough for me to know that I wanted to work with a midwife. So I ended up finding this midwife team who are just absolute angels. I mean, they're still my friends. They're really, really incredible people. And this call that I had with the midwife was over an hour. And I remember she just took the time to walk me through every single piece of my pregnancy, my birth, postpartum, what they do, what could go wrong, what could go right, what their care looks like. Like it was so informative and just really took her time. I felt so special right away. It was like a universal sign, like this is absolutely who you're supposed to be with. I tried to interview other midwives and every single interview I set up, something happened. Like they canceled at the last minute or our connection didn't work or like I couldn't even interview another midwife because these were the people I was supposed to have. So shout out to Janice and Razy. You guys are amazing.
Oh, yeah. It's so good when it just clicks and it feels right.
Totally. So my pregnancy itself was pretty straightforward, except that I did not like being pregnant. And that was so upsetting to me because I wanted to get pregnant for so long and we worked so hard to get pregnant. And I really imagined that I would like be this pregnant, glowing goddess, walking around, like rubbing my belly and, doing all the things. And that was not the case. I was just sick and nauseous. And my baby was breech up until, I want to say like maybe 34 weeks or something. But she was really wiggly, and a breech baby that is very wiggly was just constantly like kicking down maybe into my cervix, or like her kicks would send me to my knees. And it was really painful and it was very difficult to be pregnant. And I also found that it was hard for me to stay active. And again, like my background is in fitness. I had an online fitness company. I thought I would be doing so much more. And I felt really stressed that I wasn't doing enough and I wasn't working out enough and I wasn't kind of checking all of these boxes. And I just want to say that like I ended up having a great birth and it was fine. So one thing that I did like in my second pregnancy was just try to relieve a lot of that. Not that like being active can't help you, but I don't think it's the end all be all of everything. So, and then the one other thing that I'll mention, which is just kind of cool, is that I had this vision of giving birth at home in a tent. And I have read the book, The Red Tent, 1,000,001 times. If you've never read it, you definitely should. But I really wanted to create this like beautiful birthing space. And so my husband is just like the absolute king of bringing any idea that you have to fruition. And so we bought this like almost like an event space tent, like a 10 by 10 kind of structure that had a canopy over it. And then one day he went to the thrift store and bought like 100 lace curtains. And we spent an entire day pinning curtains all around the inside and the ceiling. So it was like this gorgeous lace tent with an altar space and a heater and mats set up.
Wow.
And it became a really incredible place to like meditate before, and be with the baby and just like calm myself down. And then after I had the baby, it was actually a wonderful place to like breastfeed and, to kind of regulate with one another. So even if you can't build a tent in your house, I do think like having a space that you can dedicate to kind of birth or to thinking about your birth or to being in your pregnancy, being with your baby can be a really special thing to do.
Yeah, definitely making it cozy for a home birth or, bringing some of those comfort things to the hospital if you're having a hospital birth is always a great idea.
Yes, I agree. And that was kind of it for the pregnancy.
All right. So how did labor start?
Okay. So it was the night of March 3rd. I woke up to contractions and I was absolutely terrified. I was really, really freaked out by these contractions. And I woke up my husband and I was like, oh my God, like I think I'm in labor. They're coming in waves. And it was just like a really stressed feeling. And so the next morning they were still kind of coming. And I remember, hearing probably from this podcast, honestly, people saying, well, get into water and, the contractions will like peter out if it's not real. So I took a bath and they did fizzle out. But that moment, I knew that I was going to have a baby tomorrow. Like I just had this deep inner knowing. And it actually ended up calming me down. Like I think I had this first night kind of freak out and then it made me much more calm about actually going into labor. And sure enough, the next night, I go to sleep around 2 or 3 a.m. I wake up once again to kind of these gentle waves of contractions. And it just felt like period cramps coming every so often. This time I didn't wake up my husband. Like I didn't really even wake up myself. I was kind of able to sleep through them. And I was just remember like laying in bed and smiling and talking to my baby and being like, okay, we're going to do this. I felt so much more peaceful. The next morning I told my husband and we gave my midwives a heads up and I had like all of these ideas of things that I would do in early labor. I just had this vision of like how labor would be and how I would walk around my house and I would knit things and I would cook things and I would like do art projects, which of course I did none of those things at all, because after I was just having like these really mild period cramps and then I stood up to go to the bathroom and my water broke. And my husband and I were like, oh my God, like, that's it. Your water broke. Okay. And then I went and sat down on the toilet. I saw that I lost some of my mucus plug and I was like, all right, this is happening. And then within like 10 minutes, things went from 0 to 100. I could barely talk through contractions. I was starting to vocalize. Like we had, not really even told midwives and doula at this point. We were like, yeah, I think something could be happening. And then instantly it was like, I could not talk through contractions. So my husband called our doula who listened and said she wanted to come over right away. My midwives were like, yes, definitely have your doula come over. And so by the time my doula got there, I was laying in bed and I was really starting to moan. And then I started to vomit, which was actually a really big part of this labor. I threw up a lot in this labor. And my midwives heard that and they decided to come over right away. So around 12 o'clock noon, my water broke. And by 3:30, the whole team was there. When my midwives arrived, it was like such a beautiful moment and also really memorable. Like they walked in and they just gave me big hugs and they were like giving me kisses on my face and I started crying to see them. And I just mentioned this because when we were in our prenatal care with our midwives, I remember them saying to me, we have long sessions here because when we show up at your house, we want you to be happy to see us. And that was exactly how it felt when they walked in. I was just so happy to see them. So at this point, my husband goes downstairs because I rented a birth pool thinking I would want to have a water birth. But he's downstairs and I'm going through these contractions. I'm like, where is he? Like, what is going on? And it turns out that we had the wrong attachment for the hose. So they couldn't fill up the birth pool. And there was just like a whole debacle going on with this birth pool. And so at that point, I was like, screw the tub. Like, I don't care. I just want my partner here by my side because labor was really intense. I couldn't keep anything down. I was throwing up a lot. It was so much more intense than what I thought it was going to be. I remember kind of being like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is a lot. But fortunately, I was really supported. So anyway, the day keeps progressing on. And around 7 p.m., I was just over it. I don't know any other way to say it. I was just like totally over it. I had thought that I would be able to like really dance and move around in labor. But again, pretty much everything that I thought was going to happen did not happen. So that was not the case. I had a lot of thigh labor, which is like really feeling the contractions in your thighs. So moving was really tough for me. But I got myself to the kitchen and I just had this moment where I was like, everyone get off of me. Like, don't give me a hip compression. Don't try to give me anything to drink. I just like pushed everyone off of me and I dropped down to my hands and knees and I started crawling toward the birth tent that we had set up. And this moment, like I have video of it. It's so just like clear in my head of crawling in there because I was such an animal, like this place that people talk about that you go to when you birth and you're just, all of your animal instincts kick in. And this is what I love about home birth. And I think like really why I wanted to have a home birth is just to be able to like freely move in that way in a space that I felt so comfortable in. So I crawled my way into the tent and my husband knew exactly what was going on. And he like went to the tent and he pulled the curtain back so I can go inside. And he looked at everybody and he was like, it's time to have a baby, which is also cute because later my midwives told us that when they got to the house and they saw the tent, they were like, okay, this is beautiful, but there's no way we're going to have a baby in here because usually, you end up having the baby like on the floor in the closet or like, never where you expect to do it. But we did, in fact, give birth in the tent. So once we were in there, though, my midwives were getting concerned because I really wasn't keeping anything down, including water. I was just throwing up a lot. And they were noticing some changes in the baby's heart rate when that would happen. I didn't know that there was a change in the heart rate. They didn't want to scare me, but they knew that it could possibly be happening because of dehydration. So at that point, they were kind of encouraging me to get an IV. But I don't know what was going on in my labor land. I just did not want an IV. So every single time they would ask, the only word I could muster out was no. It was just no. My midwife suggested that we maybe do a cervical check just to kind of get a gauge on how close we were. Because if I wasn't eating and I was getting dehydrated and we still had a long time to go, we really needed an IV so I didn't tire out for the rest of the night. So that was when they did a cervical check. And that was also when I realized that I didn't fully know what a cervical check was somehow, which is like weird to me to think back. But I don't know that I fully realized that it is the hand going all the way up and like opening up in the cervix to see how far dilated you are. I kicked my midwife out the first time, like hard. And then she ended up doing it again. And I was only 7 centimeters. And I was so disheartened. Like it was at this moment where I was just laying there and I thought, who in their right mind would ever give birth at home? Like who would do this? If I was in the hospital, I would take every single drug available to me. Like I cannot do this. And of course I was in transition. Now I realize that's exactly where I was. So my cervical check was at 7:55 p.m. And at 8:15, I started to feel pushy, which means that in a matter of 20 minutes, I basically went from 7 centimeters to 10 centimeters. And I just think this is like, never judge a birth by its cervix because that shift happened really, really quickly. My husband was kind of the first person to actually notice that maybe my body was starting to push. And I remember him leaning down to me and he was like, babe, are you pushing right now? Because if you're pushing, you don't have to get the IV. And in my head, I was like, ooh, yeah, maybe this is the feeling of pushing. And so at that point, that was when we switched positions and I got up to my knees and we started to push. So I had heard a lot of people say that they felt like the pushing phase kind of offered relief. I didn't really feel that way at all. I thought the pushing phase was really tough for me anyway. My husband was kind of down on the ground initially, kind of under my legs as though he may catch the baby. But at some point, he instinctively moved up to sit on a chair that I was leaning against so that I could lean over him. And I'm so happy he did. I have like a really, really encouraging and supportive partner who's obsessed with birth and babies and being a dad and all of the things. And I just remember starting to feel the baby descend and like my body was so full, like just the fullest that your body can be. And I locked eyes with him and I know that my eyes were terrified, thinking, I can't do this. And he was looking back at me. And we weren't saying anything out loud, but we were saying a million things with our eyes. And he was just looking at me like, you can do this. You can 100% do this. It's actually the picture that I gave to you is a picture of this moment of us just staring at one another while the baby is descending.
Yes, it will be on the show notes.
And then there was like this other part of me also during this time that felt very confused. Like, I think that when you give birth for the first time, right? You maybe take a class or you learn the different phases of labor. So you logically know what they are. But then when you're in labor, you don't physically know what they are. So there was still a piece of me that was like, did I transition? Am I pushing? Of course I was pushing, right? But I just was confused. Is this going to be 5 more minutes? Is this going to be hours more? Which I guess no one really knows. But I remember yelling out, like, what is happening? What is happening? Somebody tell me. And my midwife just calmly looking at me and being like, you're doing it. This is it. The only way through is through. They asked if I wanted to touch her head, and I really didn't feel like I wanted to. I also felt confused as to how I could possibly reach my hand down there. Like doing any movement at all just felt so tough. But at one point I did kind of reach down and touch her head, and she sort of sucked back up into my body. And I was like, I'm good. I don't need to touch her head.
Yeah.
That's not for me. So then she started to crown. I certainly felt the ring of fire. It was very intense. I pushed slow. I waited for the contraction, and then out she came. And my midwife scooped her up and immediately put her into my arms. And I mean, the look of astonishment on my face, we have a birth video, and the just pure astonishment that like I did this, and looking around this lace tent of these wise women, just being like, I did it. It was the most incredible, chaotic. It was every single feeling in the world.
Yeah.
And funny enough, my daughter was born at 9:39 p.m.
Oh my gosh.
And she came when I was 39 weeks and 3 days pregnant. So
Wow.
39 is now also her lucky number.
Yeah. So fun.
So I felt very shocked once I had her. And I had heard people kind of talk about, all the pain goes away and you're just in pure bliss, but I can't really say I felt that way. I don't know that I felt like immediate bonding. I was also like on the floor on a hard mat, and my body just hurt, and it just was, I like wanted a shower. I wanted to sleep. It was just like a lot of things going on at once. And I just mentioned that because if anybody else has that feeling, I'm with you. I did too. I thought after birth was really, really weird feeling going on.
Yeah.
And I had to be stitched up. I had like a little tear because her hand kind of whacked me when I came out. So it was a weird stitch. And, I'm like on my couch with the lights on getting stitched up. And that was not very fun.
Yeah.
But that was her birth, and it was awesome.
All right. Well, do you want to share anything from postpartum, or do you want to go ahead and get into the next birth?
The only thing I want to say from postpartum is that she did not latch for 5 days.
Oh, wow.
And I was pumping and kind of spoon feeding her and syringe feeding her. But what's really fascinating about this is I didn't actually realize that this was a big deal in a good way. I had a midwife team that was just like, okay, let's get a lactation consultant over here. Let's work on it. Let's do this. Let's do that. Like they stayed really positive. And now I've met other people who have had similar experiences who didn't get that same kind of care and were made to feel really afraid. And as we all know, after you give birth, like your hormones are already crazy enough. Like I already had enough fear going on. And I just feel so grateful that I didn't have anything extra placed on me. The lactation consultant ended up giving me a nipple shield, and my baby latched right away. And then I started to feel stressed that I needed to wean her from a nipple shield. Like the online conversation about nipple shields are really not great.
Yeah.
So I was like really worried I was going to lose my milk supply, or my baby was going to get thrush and I needed to wean her. But when I would try to get her to latch without the nipple shield, she would just cry and I would get so stressed. And I was like, I don't want breastfeeding to be a miserable experience. So this was kind of one of my first like big intuitive pieces as a mom, where I was like, I'm just going to let my baby lead, and I'm just going to do what feels right. And when she was about 3 months old, one day she knocked the nipple shield off of my boob and latched just fine. And we went on to breastfeed for 14 months.
Yeah.
So, sometimes it's just all in their own timing.
Yeah. I feel like I'm hearing that more and more too. And I think a lot of it is just being more open to not like having to meet these exact standards and milestones for nursing. And I hear like, oh, it was so hard in the beginning. And then all of a sudden, even at 6 months, baby just figured it out. So it's like, if you can just figure out what works for you in the meantime, it doesn't mean it's going to always be, pumping only or nipple shield or whatever it is.
Totally. That is like the best thing because they do change so rapidly month over month.
Yeah. I always felt like it was like this big milestone when the baby's head was bigger than my boob. It was like, oh, now they have like a real shot at like getting their mouth around this thing.
Totally.
And you're so engorged in the beginning and everything. So,
yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I want to get on to your next story. So whatever you want to share from pregnancy or getting pregnant with baby number 2.
Okay. So after we had Kilmer, her name is Kilmer. It's my grandfather's last name. After we had Kilmer, we felt really pulled to move to Florida. We had family there, and every time we would go visit, she was just like the happiest baby there. And it was very, very strange because never in a million years did I think that we would move to Florida, but it was like, we need to go. So we put our house on the market. We sold our house. We started getting packed up. And this was December of 2023. We decided that we were going to do another IUI cycle at our fertility clinic before we left because, of course, I'm like nervous about how long it was going to take us to get pregnant this time. So the plan was we would do an IUI cycle in December of 2023. We were moving to Florida in January of 2024. And then if we weren't pregnant by May of 2024, we would use one of our embryos. We didn't end up getting pregnant from the IUI cycle. We moved January 19th and we took like this road trip in an RV that was 4 days in an ice storm. I mean, that was another hot mess, whatever. But we took this big trip to Florida and we got here and I was like, I don't know. I think I may be ovulating. There was way too much going on for me to even be tracking it right now, but I just was kind of like, I could be ovulating right now. And so we decided to have sex that first night. And quite literally the very first day we got to Florida, we got pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
So I was then 8 weeks pregnant on my daughter's first birthday. And I was just really excited, also shocked that it didn't take a long time. My due date was in October. And I remember being initially nervous because for some reason, I thought that hurricane season was only the month of October. I now know that hurricane season is like May through November, but I was like, oh my God, we're due in the hurricane month, which is going to come into play later in the story.
Okay.
So pregnancy was pretty straightforward. It was easier than my last one. The only two things that I'll call out is that I did switch my midwife care. I knew I wanted to have another home birth. I interviewed midwives. I was with someone. I ended up switching away from her at 27 weeks. There was nothing wrong with her. She was highly skilled, but I just didn't feel a connection and it just didn't feel right. And so I decided that I wanted to go to someone else and I ended up hiring my doula's sister. So I had kind of this sister birth team that they were really, really fantastic. And then the other thing that happened is when I was 35 weeks and 6 days, I was home alone with just my toddler. My husband was in LA. My midwife and doula were out of town. Like every friend that I had made that was relatively close to me, everyone was out of town. And I started having contractions. And I really started freaking out that I was going to be going into labor early and that I wasn't going to be able to have a home birth and that no one was going to be here with me. My husband ended up flying back early and the rest of the pregnancy, it was like almost on bed rest because my body was just like really hurting and we were just trying to make it so the baby wouldn't come early. It was fully a false alarm, but that brought up a lot of anxiety for me. Also around this time, there was hurricanes starting to happen. Hurricane Helene, which was the one that devastated Asheville so much, was like scheduled to hit right at the end of September. And my body would really hurt when we had these storms because of the barometric pressure drop. And I think I started to get really nervous about giving birth. And I thought that the second time I would feel more confident and more comfortable. And in some ways I did, but also like the first time that you give birth, it's very abstract, right? Like you have this idea of what it may be. But then the second time you give birth, you know what it's going to be. And so I was really worried about like, one, going back there to all of that intensity and going through labor again. And two, I was also just like really worried that I was going to stall out and that I was going to know that labor was close and I was going to be afraid and I was going to pull back and stall out. And I talked to my original midwives of my first birth about this, and they were like, you know, what if you reframe stalling as to just your body giving you what it needs? And I really held on to this, and I loved this idea that like maybe, you know, sometimes when we stall in labor, it's just because our body needs like a little more time or it needs a little break. And then that gives us the energy that we need to continue on. And that labor and birth itself does not have to be linear. And that really made me feel good. So around 37 weeks, we put up the tent. Once again, we kept all of the pieces. And this time it was like outside in our screened in lanai porch. And we were just preparing for baby. So I got to 39 weeks, which is, I think that my babies are all going to come in the 39th week. And there was a massive hurricane starting to head to the west coast of Florida. We're on the east coast. This is Hurricane Milton. And I don't know if anyone remembers, but people were really, really worried about this hurricane because it was like one of the biggest that had been seen. Like it was like a record-breaking hurricane in the ocean. And as the days got closer, it was very clear that this hurricane was going to hit on the west side and it was going to travel across the state. The big issue with this is that we live on a little island. So you cross over two bridges to get to us. There's only one way in and one way out. And on one side is the ocean, and on the other side is the river that connects to the ocean. So like we are a stone's throw away from water on both sides. And now I'm 39 weeks and 4 days pregnant, which is 1 day longer than I was pregnant with my first. And the entire area is preparing for a hurricane. I mean, everyone has shutters on their windows. The grocery store is empty. Home Depot's empty. It was the first time that we ever experienced a hurricane in Florida where we were in the path of the storm. And my entire body is just like hurting so bad because of this storm coming through. It's apparently really, really common that pressure drop, especially when you're pregnant, creates a lot of body aching. So then we get word that they're going to close our bridges that lead to our house, and they're going to set a curfew for the night, which means that if I did go into labor, our midwives wouldn't be able to drive in. We would be able to leave, but we would have to cross the bridge in a storm. And also ambulances cannot drive in sustained winds of 50 miles per hour. So long story short, I'm freaking out, right? I'm like, I cannot go into labor right now, and I'm the most pregnant I've ever been in my life.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So we decided to evacuate. And fortunately, we had like booked a hotel room as like a just in case, but we decided we're going to get out. So this is October 9th. The storm is scheduled to hit our side of the state in the evening of October 10th. We take down our tent. We take down the birth tent because it was outside. We get the shutters on the house. Like it is absolute pure chaos. There's heavy winds, rains. We're like getting to the car with the toddler. And we're also packing up the car with like baby stuff in case we have a baby while we're out. So like a car seat and blankets. And, I just we have no idea what's going to happen. So we get to the hotel, and I remember as we went in, my husband was like, he's going to wait. The baby's not coming. Okay. He's going to wait. And in my head, I just thought, no, he's not. Like, no, he's not. He's totally going to come because of course he would. So we get to the hotel. My husband is up late working, and I go to bed. And I'm just sleeping terrible because my body hurts and I'm up and down to go to the bathroom and I'm really restless. And then like around 3 a.m., I was like, wait, does my body hurt just because I'm pregnant, or does my body hurt because I'm having contractions? So I pull out the app on my phone and I start kind of laying there, timing them without really looking, just like tapping the button on and off. And then finally, after an hour, I look at my phone and my contractions are 5 minutes apart, lasting for almost a full minute, and it had been going on for an hour. So I'm like at the 511 roll. I'm like, I'm in labor. So I get up to tell my husband and I'm like, babe, wake up. We don't want to wake up our toddler, right? We're like in a hotel room. I'm like, wake up. I think I'm having contractions. And he kind of half opens his eyes and he's like, no, babe, I'm sure you're not. And I go, my water just broke. And I like grab his hand. I'm like, right? That's my water, right? And he's like, oh my God, his hand is like dripping wet. So I'm standing there, my water's breaking. We're like in the Homewood Suites. I call my midwives who do not have power. And it's actually at this time that the storm is passing through. So the storm was supposed to hit much later that day, but it got there early. So the storm is currently passing through. There's crazy winds outside. There's all kinds of tornado sirens. And we just start preparing to have this baby in the hotel room. I also felt like this was my second birth, so I wasn't sure if it was going to come a lot faster, than what my first birth did, which really wasn't a long labor for a first-time mom. However, as fate would have it, thank goodness, my toddler woke up around 6 a.m. And as soon as she woke up, my contractions just started to slow down. And then about an hour later, the storm passed completely over. And then the bridges to our house opened back up. And it was like beautiful outside and the storm was gone. And I was like, let's go home. Because at that point, my contractions had stalled to like one every maybe 30 minutes or something. So we got home. My husband's parents came over. They helped us set up the tent. Like we just got the house set back up. The midwives came over because they didn't have power. And then the day was like the early labor day that I actually always imagined in my first birth. It was so beautiful. We went to the beach. I took a shower on my hands and knees. Like I was so in love with labor, and it was like still pretty, mild. I was like breathing through contractions, but it was just kind of what I always imagined it to be. Then the evening started to come around and I was like a little bit worried. My water had broken at 4 a.m. Now we're getting closer to 8 p.m. I was nervous about how long I was going to be able to labor at home, knowing that I had some of my waters broken. But my midwife was so great about not putting any fear on me. And she was just like, your body's doing what it needs to be doing. I'm not worried. Everything is great. So I didn't have any added stress. My husband put our daughter to bed around 8. And at that point, I was like, I'm going to lay down and take a nap because nothing's going on and I'm so exhausted from this crazy day. So I laid down in the tent with the peanut ball in between my legs. And within 2 minutes, I feel this kind of big tug on the inside and a second bag of waters broke. And then much like the first time, it was on right away. Once that happened, contractions picked up. I started vocalizing through them. Things were getting really intense. I texted my husband being like, hurry and get her down to bed because I need you here. And then as soon as he came down, I started to move toward transition. I started vomiting once again. And this time we had a birth pool set up. We had all of the attachments this time. So we had a birth pool outside right next to the tent. The ocean waves were huge. So you could hear the ocean. And it was just this really awesome setup. One of the thoughts that I carried with me in this pregnancy was just really about leaning in. So every contraction that I had, I would say, open, lean in. That was the thing that I said over and over. And I imagined waves filling me up, right? Because this is my ocean, Florida hurricane baby. And I just imagined these waves filling up my cervix and helping me open up and then releasing. And it's not necessarily that this labor was so much easier than the first one. I guess in ways it was, but I felt more connected to what was happening. And I think at the end of the day, I said earlier that the second time I was worried that I would know what was coming and I would pull back because of fear. And that actually didn't happen at all. Because I knew what was coming, I could think about it less and I could just lean in more and connect with my baby. I also fell asleep in the middle of contractions, which I've heard people say that they do. I didn't think it was possible, but I was so exhausted that I would be like, I just want to take a little nap. And I would close my eyes and I could visually see like a contraction kind of walking across my vision. And I would slap it away. And then another one would come and I'd be like, nope, not yet. And I would slap it away so I could sleep. And then I would open my eyes and have a big contraction and push. We're getting close to midnight at this point. It was about 11:30. I had been pushing for a little over an hour and we were in the same position. I was on my knees. I was holding on to my husband who was just outside of the pool. One thing I will say is I've now had a birth in water and outside of water. Like water in some ways made it better, like especially for thigh labor because I could move my body a little bit more in the water. But I do think it's harder to push in the water because it's harder to get a grip. So I do plan on having more kids. I don't know what I'll do next time, but I don't know that for me, water birth was necessarily easier or harder. I just think they were different. Once he fully crowned, so he wasn't necessarily, kind of going down and coming back up, but once he fully crowned, it was a full 4 minutes to birth his head. I mean, he just like slowly came out. And I don't know if I just didn't have any more strength to push him out faster or if he just wanted to take his time. But that part was really, really tough. And I have this awesome video of just like, you see his eyebrows, then his eyes, then his nose, just like a little bit at a time. Once his head was out, my midwife kind of supported his body because he started to kind of look like he was gasping for some air. And then he swept down into the water and I scooped him up in my arms, which was really cool to be the first person to touch my baby. And I just remember looking at him and I said, you look exactly like I thought you would, because I had had visions of him before I was even pregnant. And he always looked like my dad, who died when I was young. And I just felt like my dad sent him to me in this way. And he still very, very much looks like my dad, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Once he was born, my husband went upstairs to wake up our daughter. And they all came down. And as a whole family, we did the afterbirth together. I didn't need any stitches. I had a really slight tear, but it wasn't even worth like suturing. Everything grew back together fine. And his name is Pesci, which is my husband's grandfather's last name. So both of the kids have last names from our mother's maiden name, but Pesci means fish in Italian, which I just think is, quite fitting given
Yeah.
all of his stuff.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
So fun. All right. And what about postpartum and nursing with your second?
Yeah. So the thing that I want to say about postpartum is actually this happened with my first as well, but I had a recurring clogged duct, always in the same breast. It was a breast that I had a breast surgery in 2019. And so that's the reason it always clogs. I want to bring this up because there is like so little information online for people who struggle with recurring clogged ducts. So if you're a person that like breast gymnastics doesn't work and, sunflower lecithin, like there's just some really basic things, but none of that worked for me. And with my daughter, I was getting clogs like once a week. It was pretty much always clogged and it was just so painful and horrible. So I found a solution, which has been life-saving, and it's just like completely saved this breastfeeding journey. But basically what I do is once a week, I go and get a lymph massage for 30 minutes, specifically on my breast. And that has been like a game changer. I also bought an ultrasound therapy machine. If you live in bigger cities, like I included a resource that's in New York City, you can find somebody who can do this work on you, but I couldn't find anyone in Florida. So when I have an active clog, I use an ultrasound machine. You can also use K-tape. I'm linking a really great vitamin that has been supported, but overall, this lymph massage done by someone else, I've tried to do it myself, but it doesn't have the same effect, has kept me clog-free and able to breastfeed. And so I wanted to call that out in case anybody else is as lost as I was.
Yeah, thanks for that. And we'll have to share that on the show notes too.
And I also gave the link to the book, The Red Tent, because I just think it's the best pregnancy read that there is.
Yeah. Okay. All right, awesome. And then where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram. My handle is Bethany C. Myers. I share a lot of motherhood stuff and life stuff on there.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Bethany.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much again to Bethany for sharing her stories with us and to Anito for sponsoring this episode. You can check out their fertility tracker at anito.com. That's INITO.com using the coupon code THEBIRTHHOUR to get the device for just $89. If you want more information from today's episode, head over to thebirthhour.com and just search for Bethany's name in the search bar to find her show notes page.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.